cut on the other light, huh? Hold on. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so we are in the book of Umdat ArRaghib, and the last thing that we were talking about was the correct pronunciation of the Shahadatain and the alternative statements a person can say if they wanted to become a Muslim. So now we have reached the area where the author is talking about the meaning of Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. So the author, may Allah have mercy on him, said, the meaning of Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, I testify that no one is God except Allah, is I know, I believe in my heart, and I declare with my tongue that nothing is worshipped rightfully except Allah. The explanation. The meaning of the saying of the jurists, i.e., the fuqaha, nothing is worshipped rightfully except Allah, is that no one deserves to be worshipped, which means nothing deserves to be offered the utmost degree of humbleness and humility except Allah, as was said by the Imam, the Hafiz, the Faqih, the linguist, Taqiyuddin as-Subki, and others. And his wording was that worship is the maximal degree of submission and subjugation. So right there, we went over a lot, leave it at that. So one is said that this is the meaning of the saying of the jurist. Okay, jurist, fuqaha. This is the people that are legal scholars in fiqh. Okay, so fuqaha are the people who practice fiqh, the high rank scholars in that. And we translated that as jurist. It's like judges or lawyers in Islamic law. It says, they said that nothing is worshipped rightfully except Allah. Okay? Is that no one deserves to be worshipped, which means nothing deserves to be offered the utmost degree of humbleness and humility except Allah. As was said by the Imam, the Hafiz. The Hafiz means I think I told you what a Hafiz was before. Let's see if you remember. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So the top ranking hadith scholar is called a Hafiz. But a lot of times people use the term Hafiz for a person that memorized the Quran. But in the context that we're using, this is what we're talking about, what you said, the top ranking hadith scholar. Okay. So the faqih, so he was a faqih. Faqih is singular of fuqaha. So he was a jurist. Okay. And they have the linguist. So he was a scholar of language in the Arabic, scholar of the Arabic language. His name was Taqiyuddin as-Subki, and he was a mujtahid within the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i. So he was a high-ranking scholar, very high-ranking scholar. And it said, and others, and his wording, so they basically said the same thing but in different wordings, right? But they said his wording was that worship is the maximal degree of submission and subjugation. And they have some footnotes here, so let's go to that footnote. It says okay, so they have here for the footnote, they said a highly ranked scholar of hadith is called a hafiz. This title is usually given to a person who memorizes most of the sayings of the Prophet, along with the chain of narrators of each hadith. And we add to that, they're also qualified to grade the ahadith. And they know, like, in order to be qualified to grade the ahadith, they know the narrators. Okay, so they like this is they learn the biographies of the different narrators. This is how they know how to grade the different hadith. So they know the different conditions of the narrators so that they can know how to judge a hadith just by knowing the route and the time frame and stuff. They learn a lot, basically. And they mention, as far as that definition that is transmitted from Taqiyuddin Subki, the Hafiz Az-Zabidi related this in his explanation of Al-Qamus. So, Al-Qamus is like a huge dictionary in the Arabic language. And Hafiz Az-Zabidi, his name was Murtada Az-Zabidi. He's like considered like the last of the great linguists. So he wrote an explanation of this book, Al-Qamus, and he explained certain things in it. So basically, when we're talking about worship, worship has its limitations. Okay, so we're defining worship because there are people these days who try to include in worship what's not part of it. But let's finish read the thing, and then I'll go some more into that, inshallah ta'ala. So it says, had the meaning of worship been the unrestricted obedience to a creation in anything, whether a good deed or a sin, the workers of the unjust rulers would have been kuffar, disbelievers. Okay, so it's mentioning that case because some people falsely say that worship is to obey someone other than Allah. Like if someone ordered you to do a sin and you did it, okay, then they would say that you worship that person. That's not true. Okay, if someone ordered you to do a sin and you did it, you were sinful, but you didn't fall into shirk. You're not doing kufr. Okay, you're doing a sin. Okay, the position of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that the Muslim who does a sin is a sinner unless he deems that sin to be permissible while he knows that it's not permissible. So, like, if you know that such and such deed is haram, but you say in your heart that you don't believe it's haram, i.e., that as if the religion is wrong, then you will commit blasphemy because now you're legislating or you're permitting the unlawful, and vice versa. If you deem something haram that is lawful, and you know the religion permits it, like let's say for you to marry a woman, this is permissible, right? Okay, so if you deemed it haram, and you know that the religion allows for it to happen, and you deemed it haram, then you will be going against the religion. Then you'll fall into kufr. But doing a sin and recognizing it as a sin does not make it haram. So even if you're obeying somebody, I think I just said that wrong. So doing a sin and recognizing it as a sin does not make it blasphemy. It doesn't take you out of the religion. It's you're doing something haram. You're sinful for doing that. And the only way you would fall into blasphemy is if you know that you're doing something sinful and you're deeming it to be lawful. Okay, so then you're purposely contradicting the religion. And that's a wrong definition that people put on. So, and these same people who make this so-called statement, if you analyze their teachings, they actually fall into what they say, what they're accusing others of doing. So they would say that to obey a creation in opposition to Allah is to worship that creation, and they themselves obey creations in opposition to Allah. The first thing that they did is by that statement, because you cannot give fatwa without knowledge. So they're giving a ruling without knowledge. And the Prophet ﷺ related to us that the person who gives fatwa without knowledge is cursed by the angels. Okay? The angels curses the person that gives fatwa without knowledge. So for this reason, the pious Muslim, the knowledgeable Muslim, if you're asked about a ruling in the religion and you never heard the ruling, okay, you never heard the ruling and you didn't hear even a case, because in some cases we can use what we learned to say a ruling, even though it's not exactly what we learned. But that's limited for us that are not scholars. Be very careful with this. Okay, like, so for example, to give you an example of a case where you can do that versus a case that you cannot do that. Like, you learned that to drink something intoxicating in general is haram. So if someone comes to you with a bottle of tequila and they ask you, is this halal? You say, no, it's haram. You don't have to hear that tequila in particular was haram. You know that tequila is intoxicating. It has alcohol in it and it's haram. So you deem it as haram. You don't have to hear that particular statement. So if you did this, you're not falling into a sin. But there are other cases where, not to give you an example of a case that I don't know would be more difficult. But there are other cases where basically if someone asks you a ruling and you didn't hear that ruling, you can't just use your mind and come with that case. You need to hear specifically. Okay, and inshallah we'll run across that later on in the book. Okay, so the person who gives fatwa without knowledge is cursed by the angels. The angels are awliya, yani. So if the angels are cursing you, you're doing a sin. So this indicates that this is a major sin, because the angel, the wali, wouldn't curse somebody for something petty. It's a major sin. Let's see. So it goes on. It says, so do those workers of unjust rules would have been kuffar, right? So it says, so do those people who claim that mere obedience or making tawassul is worship and deem those who make tawassul by the prophets and awliya, righteous Muslims, as disbelievers, say about themselves that they are mushriks? Okay, so these same people that make this claim about obeying someone other than Allah or in opposition to Allah is blasphemy. Amongst these people are those who say that they say that to make tawassul is worship. Now, is worshiping other than Allah, right? And they say the people who make tawassul by the prophets and the awliya, the Muslim saints, are blasphemous. So now we got to explain what is tawassul. Do you know what tawassul is, Mr. Uwais? Not sure. Yeah, isn't it sure? No. Completely different. No. Dry wudu is mashallah, I can't think of the word now. I know it, but tayammum. Mashallah. Okay, tawassul. Okay, tawassul is to take by a means, basically. So basically, okay, these people that say making tawassul is haram or kufr, right? They're saying, what they say is to make tawassul by someone who is not alive or present is blasphemy. That's to be more exact what their claim is. Okay. But if you were to go to a Muslim that's alive and you say to that Muslim to pray for you, they don't have a problem with that in general. Or if you made tawassul by your deed, they don't have a problem with that. So in one hadith, the case with the making the tawassul by the deed came in a hadith where there was 3 people. They walked into a cave, right? Because maybe they were hiding from the weather or something. Whatever the case, they went into the cave, and when they went into this cave, all of a sudden a boulder came down and it closed the opening on the cave, right? And there was like, if they went to try to move the boulder, but there was no way they could move the boulder, right? So they consulted with each other and they had a conversation, and they said the only way we're going to get out here is by the help of Allah. So they said, they said for each of them to make a supplication to Allah and ask Allah to move the boulder out of how would you put it? Like out of a merit, like because of a good deed that they did, basically. Okay. So each one, when they supplicated to Allah, they mentioned a good deed that they did. Okay. So one of them was he used to always make sure to feed his parents before he fed his children and wife, right? So, because his parents were old and he was taking care of his parents, and he used to honor them that he would feed them before he fed his children and his wife. However, when he had came after milking the sheep, whatever, right? He came to bring the milk to his parents. His parents had fell asleep. And so rather than give the milk to his children, he sat by his parents' bed until they woke up. He didn't wake them up. He waited for them to wake up so that they could drink from the milk before his children. So he honored his parents like that. And so he said, he did that seeking the acceptance of Allah, and the boulder moved. Another one, he had hired somebody to do some work, and this person left before getting the payment, right? So he took the payment that he owed that person and he invested it in his business, and he watched how the money grew. And then when this person finally came back, which was after a long period of time, he pointed this person to an area and he said, "You see that over there? That's your portion of your wages that I was able to make money off of." And he gave that person like a huge amount of stuff for that little bit of work that he did, because he continued to invest and grow his money. And so he said, "If I did this for your sake, oh Allah, move the rock." And the rock moved some more, but it still wasn't enough space for them to leave. Then the third person, he mentioned that he had a cousin of his that he used to like, and he would try to talk to her to marry him, but she would not accept. And then she was very poor, so he found her in a situation where she was extremely hungry and she needed food. And so he said, "Okay, since you won't marry me, then he said, I'll give you this food, but you have to fornicate with me." And yeah,
why you just turn off the thing so hard, baby? You can't turn it on. We can't turn it on.
I turn it off hard so it stopped dripping. But
I can't turn it on, and she can't turn it on.
Okay, I could turn it on. Hold on, Wes.
You got to learn to fix it.
Oh, hello, Mr. Weiss. Weiss, you still there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, what was that in the story? Oh, so when he gave her the funds, so that she would be able to get something to eat, and he was about to fornicate with her, She pleaded with him, and he let her go and let her keep the money without fornicating with her. And he did that for the sake of Allah. And then and so he supplicated mentioning this deed, and the rock moved, and they was able to get out. So this is a case of making tawassul by your deeds. This is mentioned in a hadith that's in Sahih Bukhari, and I paraphrased it, right? Okay. Also, just like we can supplicate by our good deeds, we can supplicate by the rank of a prophet or a wali. Okay, so some of the awliya we know, like the 10 that was promised paradise. Okay, these are well-known awliya. There's no doubt about them. There are other awliya we know from history, but the ones that we are definitively certain about are those 10 that were promised paradise and ones sitting, and the companions who participated in Badr, the companions who participated in the battle of Uhud, the companions who had given the oath under the tree of Ar-Ridwan. Uh, these companions we know to be awliya, and we'll have to talk about those in detail in another case. But this is a lot of companions, okay, that we know are awliya from different narrations. Uh, Beyond those companions, or there are some people who are awliya that the ummah has relayed to us, and from different experiences, we judge by the apparent, right? So if you have a person who appeared to be a pious Muslim, uh, and you don't know of any evil from them, and they were acting according to the religion, then in general we would judge this person as a wali, especially if certain things were relayed about them. So like Imam Shafi'i, there is some things relayed about him that make it clear that he was amongst the awliya. Same with Abu Hanifa, same with Malik, same with Ahmed bin Hanbal. Okay, so and there were others historically, like Imam Ahmed Rifa'i, Abdul Qadir al Jilani. These are people that we say without hesitation, generally, they're amongst the awliya. Okay. Um, so, uh, and the Muslims since their time, and I done lost my page. Hold on. The Muslims since their time have been regarding them as awliya, and there are like, and certain prophets whose graves are known to be in certain places, or whose what you will call maqam. Maqam is like a station. So there are certain places that are associated with prophets that people would go to, and they would make dua, and they would seek the acceptance of their supplication by that prophet. These are people that are making tawassul. Okay. Or if someone went to the prophet's grave and they made tawassul by the prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, because Muhammad's grave, out of all the prophets, we definitively know where Muhammad is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Uh, so people will make tawassul by the prophets, and the case of making tawassul by the prophet is taught by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. There's a hadith, it's known as the hadith of the blind man. I should have prepared that. Maybe next lesson we will go over the hadith of the blind man. But in short, basically, there was a blind man who came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and there were companions that were sitting in a circle. And amongst those companions, there was a man named Uthman bin Hunayf. It's not Uthman bin Affan, but Uthman bin Hunayf, because both of them are mentioned in this story that I'm going to tell you about. So Uthman bin Affan is the famous companion who was amongst the 10, who was given the good news of paradise and who became the third Khalifa of the Muslims, We're not talking about him yet. But Uthman bin Hunayf was another companion. So he was sitting in this circle and he relayed to us in the hadith that this blind man came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and I'm paraphrasing once again. This blind man comes to the Prophet and he complains about his not being able to see. And so the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, uh, what would you call it, advised him to be patient with it because it would be more rewardable if he was patient with his case of not being able to see. And he complained that he didn't really have nobody to help him. And so he asked the Prophet to make dua that his eyesight would be cured. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he told him to go to the place where he makes wudu, to perform wudu, and then to go and pray 2 rak'ah prayers, and then to supplicate a supplication. And the Prophet, in this supplication that he told him to supplicate after the 2 rak'ah, he told him to say words where he addressed the Prophet. Okay, so in this hadith you have tawassul, and you have what's called istighatha, calling out, seeking the help. Okay, so he addressed the Prophet in this dua. We'll go over the exact narration maybe next time, like I said. And uh and he supplicated to Allah, right? And the man who relayed this hadith, he said, we were sitting there and we hadn't gotten up to leave, and the man came back and it was as if he was never blind. Okay, so and he relayed this hadith after to another person in the time of the Khalifa of Uthman. Okay, because these people who object on tawassul and istighatha, remember we said they say you can't call out to somebody or seek help from someone unless they are alive and present, right? So in the first part of this hadith that I just mentioned, the man, he left the Prophet, he went and made wudu, then he went to his place of prayer, and he prayed 2 rakahs. After he finished the 2 rakahs, he made the supplication and he addressed the Prophet, and he was not in the Prophet's presence. Okay, so that kills one case of their statement. Then in this next part, because this was during the time of Uthman ibn Affan, so when Uthman ibn Affan was the Khalifa, a man came to this man, Uthman bin Hunayf, and he complained that he had been trying to get assistance from Uthman ibn Affan. Since Uthman ibn Affan is the ruler of the Muslims, he wanted assistance from Uthman ibn Affan with some type of problem he had. But he's like, as if Uthman always forgets about him. So Uthman ibn Hunayf, he taught the man this supplication. He told him just as the Prophet told the blind man, whatever, right? And he said, go do that, and then you can come to me, whatever, right? So what the man did, he went and did as Uthman ibn Hunayf told him, but instead of going back to Uthman ibn Hunayf, he went to Uthman ibn Affan. And when he went there, all of a sudden, Uthman ibn Affan tended to every matter that he did and solved his problem. So after he got his problem solved, he went back to Uthman ibn Hunayf and he thanked him for talking to Uthman ibn Affan. And Uthman ibn Hunayf told him, I didn't speak to Uthman ibn Affan, right? And then he told him, however, I saw that the Prophet did such and such, and he mentioned the case that I just told you about, where the blind man came to the Prophet. So this is called dua. This is called dua haja, the dua of need. Okay. So in this was after the Prophet was dead, had passed away. Okay. So after the Prophet passed away, he's in barzakh. He's in the life of the grave. This man did this supplication, and in this supplication he addresses the Prophet, right? Furthermore, in our regular prayer that we do every day, right? We say Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. What does that translate as? It translates as uh, like the peace be upon you, O Prophet, as if you're addressing the Prophet, as if he's right there with you. Okay. In normal cases, you can't address nobody in the prayer. Okay. But in this one case, as the Prophet has taught us and has been transmitted to us from the companions, we address the Prophet directly. Assalamu alayka. Alayka is O you. Okay. Peace be upon you. Okay. Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi. O Prophet. Ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And the blessings and mercy of Allah be upon you. We're saying all of that as if you're talking to the Prophet. Okay. So if uh addressing someone who is not present and alive was blasphemy, as these Mushabbiha Wahhabis claim, then the whole Ummah would basically be blasphemous. And that's not the case. So they made up something. They made a bid'ah, okay, an innovation, and they made rulings that don't comply with the rules of the religion. And they're deeming people as blasphemers for something that is not the case. But let's finish read the text. Any questions? Mr. Uwais? Hello? You said, what did I say? You really couldn't hear me?
Yeah, you started bugging out, or like you just when you just forgot to say your name, you started bugging out. You asking a question?
Yeah, I asked, did you have any questions?
Oh no.
Okay. Okay, so where we at? It says, don't those people themselves obey the rulers in some sense?
Talking about what?
Okay, what you say?
I was gonna answer the question, but
I'm not sure what you just said. It says, don't those people themselves obey the rulers in some sense? And yes, it's the case. We just mentioned that, mashallah, that they're deeming Muslims as blasphemers for addressing the Prophet or awliya is actually kufr for one. And they obey their rulers in other innovations, like the innovation in the sa'i. So in sa'i is an act that we do when we go on Hajj. So the area of the sa'i has been restricted to a certain area. Okay. So between Safa and Marwa, there's an area that we run back and forth to in the mountain if we are making Hajj. This is called sa'i, right? Uh, so the Prophet specified where we would do the sa'i, but later on, like recently, this is real recent, like within our lifetime, or at least within my lifetime. It happened before you was born, but in my lifetime, okay. It happened after I was born and before you were born. Uh, the Saudi government, they expanded the area of the side, and so they have a part of it because they wanted to say that, oh, it's overcrowded, so we need to make it bigger. But Yani, this has been going on for centuries. Okay. Uh, and that doesn't validate a reason to make it bigger. Okay. Basically, we as Muslims have to adjust without changing stuff in a way that is inappropriate. Okay. So they, instead of adjusting without changing stuff in a way that's inappropriate, they made this bid'ah where they expanded the area of the side. And so many people who don't know about this case, by the way, they go over there performing Hajj, and they don't know that the people expanded the sa'i, and they do the sa'i in a way that's invalid. So what's their judgment? Their judgment is awful. Like, it's an awful thing, because once you enter ihram, you cannot come out of ihram. Okay, so ihram is the state that you enter when you go on Hajj, right? So it's not permissible for you to come out of ihram till you fulfill the rites of the Hajj properly. So, and there are some cases where if certain things aren't done, there's a kafara, and there's other cases whereas if it's not done, then yeah, you cannot come out of this state. Okay, so but people, they think they did the Hajj correctly because they don't know that the sa'i has been expanded, and they go and do an invalid Hajj, and they went in the case of ihram, and so when they came out of ihram, they never came out of ihram properly. So everything they're doing is haram. Like, once you're in ihram, you can't do certain things. There are certain things that are unlawful for you to do. And these people, they think they didn't perform Hajj, and they didn't went back home to whatever country they came from, and they don't know what's going on, and they're living sin, just catching a bunch of sins. Okay, so all of this is going on because of this bid'ah that these Wahhabis have instituted by expanding the sa'i. But they don't deem themselves as blasphemers for expanding the sa'i, even though the sa'i has been specified by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're strange people. They don't have consistency in their judgment. So it goes on. Hence, by that, they have deemed themselves as blasphemers even without them noticing it. It says, let those who deem as blasphemers the one who seek help from the awliya or the prophets learn the meaning of worship in the language of the Arabs before letting their tongues loose and deeming others as blasphemers. So the hallmarks of the Wahhabis is you will find that they call Sunni Muslims mushriks, or they say that we do shirk. We don't do shirk. We don't worship other than Allah. Okay, we only worship Allah. That's what you're learning. Only to worship Allah. We don't worship other than Allah. Okay. If someone calls you to worship other than Allah, you don't listen to this person. This person is a kafir. Okay. So, but they would say that we're worshiping other than Allah by addressing the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, or addressing the awliya. And addressing the Prophet or the awliya or any of the other prophets is not ibadah. It's not worship. Okay. So the term that we're translating as worship is ibadah. Ibadah in the Arabic language is that thing that is only done to Allah. Okay. It is, as Taqiyuddin Subki said, the maximum degree of submission and subjugation. Okay. So when you intend to submit to the maximum degree, you do this to Allah. Okay. The ultimate submission is to Allah. This is worship. This is ibadah. But asking someone for help is not ibadah unless it's accompanied with the ultimate submission. So it says, it says, let those who deem as blasphemers the one who seek help from the awliya or the prophets learn the meaning of worship, ibadah, in the language of the Arabs before letting their tongues loose and deeming others as blasphemers. What we have mentioned is the meaning of worship, ibadah, intended in the saying of Allah in the verse, La ilaha illa anna fa'abudun. This verse means there is none worthy of, basically, there is no God except I. So Allah is speaking. Allah says, there is no God except I. So worship me. That's what Allah says. Okay. This is out of Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 25. And the saying of Allah in the verse, Iyaka na'budu, that's out of Surah Al-Fatiha, which this means you alone we worship. And this is the meaning of worship, ibadah, that is specific to Allah. which if anyone practiced to other than Allah, he would become a mushrik. So the Muslims don't teach anybody to make ibadah to other than Allah. Okay? Hence, it does not mean merely calling upon one or seeking one's assistance or help or being fearful or hopeful. So that's another thing that they would say. They falsely attribute the statement of being hopeful or fearful as being ibadah. This is also false. Okay, I think I'm gonna retitle this video because I titled it as the meaning of the first thing. It's part of that, but it's bigger than that. But we mostly dealt with defining what is ibadah here. Any question?
No.
Okay. Inshallah, that's 40 something minutes. So we'll stop here, inshallah, and maybe we'll have the next class Sunday. So let's close out with the tahleel. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات ورب اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات ورب اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات. Let's see. And